So we are going to Skype an artist based in Cape Town called Katherine Bull. And just so that you have a greater sense of her practice, I'll read a little bio of hers. So Katherine Bull, born in 1974, engages in a range of mediums to draw attention to sensory perception mediated through digital technologies and the act of representation itself. Combining digital drawing, painting, printmaking, performance and installation, she explores how we, both artist and viewer, see, understand and engage with the current digital environment. She brings analogue and digital modes of image making into conversation through digitally drawing from life, or painting, or live online broadcasts and webcams, Skype and Google image searches. In 2 decades of practice and academic teaching, Katherine has participated in numerous exhibitions locally and abroad, with international solo conferences and residencies to her name. So I'm Alexandra Ross, and I am lecturer in curation and contemporary art in the School of Art in the Department of Art History. And one of the things that my research in the past has really engaged with is not speaking for artists, but trying to find a way to weave their voice into the histories and the canon. So I thought it'd be interesting to engage with an artist whose approach, but also the projects that she's worked with engage with this idea of borders of how the analogue and the digital work together, the borders that may be perceived that transverse geographical borders, and a lot of her projects have really succinctly played with these boundaries. So I will try and swiftly work with this and see if we can get her on Skype.
Hello.
Hello, Cape Town. Hello.
Hello, Glasgow.
Hello. So I think you can see the panel here. So this is the panel that we're speaking with. I would swing you around, but it might break all the appliances. So we've got an audience in front from across the university and further, I think. So because we don't have too long, I thought we could start with a little semi-conversation. We've not rehearsed this, but there are a few things we'd like to talk about. I've got a few links that hopefully, again, we can draw up if they come up in our conversation, and they're preloaded. But the invitation that I started with to chat with you, we've known each other a while, is because of your practice. Can you think of ways in which your the methodology you adopt and the projects you've done deal with this idea of borders, and how we can maybe kind of start the conversation in that regard?
Well, when you asked me this question or sent me this a few days ago, when I go borders in my head, you go to the obvious of a geographical border, but I think where it links into my sort of trajectory of interest in my practice would be the idea that a border is in fact a projected line, that is a mark, that is an image that is then impacts a physical space or how we orientate ourselves in the world. So for a long time I've had an interest in imaging technologies and how they impact how we orientate ourselves. So I think borders in my earlier work, say in the late 90s, was more directly linked to interrogating the colonial archive and looking at how images traversed or constructed borders and boundaries and power dynamics of that, and trying to deconstruct that through a post-colonial lens. But then my interest moved to a more interest in the shift from the analog to the digital. So I think, are you guys hearing me all right?
We're hearing you. Yeah, it's no echo. Nothing's happening here. It's perfect. Are you hearing yourself echo?
Yes, I'm having So the interest in these technologies, like the platform of Skype, how they impact on collapsing time and space. So technically in my practice, for a long time I've been working on the one hand, for about 10 years, I worked digitally, drawing on the computer from life. So try, if you look at, this is an example of a project. So sort of taking traditional life drawing and creating a space in which the only way you could witness this was via the digital interface.
It is quite a clear image, but do you want to maybe say a little bit more about that data capture project?
For me, it was an interest in using technology to, in a sense, bring the analog and the digital closer together. And that happens through the fact that when you're drawing digitally, you can actually project at the same time in a different location. So I've worked with that idea of a sort of parallel space and time of the live projection, which allows a sort of virtual experience of what's happening in a different space. As well as for a sitter in a portrait study, for example, to be able to witness their portrait being drawn. And I'm interested in how bringing these digital and analog into conversation collapses the sort of sensory space, so that through the technology you're not in fact more distance, but you become more aware of, for example, the tactility of where the mouse is moving. Therefore, I can feel my skin, or I can feel where your eyes are looking. The gaze becomes a more physical, tactile experience. And then the inverse of that, which I've been doing for the last 5-6 years, is working in an analog through drawing or painting from online media as my subject. So we're using webcams, Skype, Google image searches, so online media becoming my subject, so to speak.
You've worked on some really interesting projects with
being able to try and collapse again those geographical and temporal borders, so to speak.
I was wondering, for example, I read your bio before we called you, but the way in which you've worked, for example, with live CCTV cameras, do you want to maybe mention about one of those projects? Because I think that's really interesting, this idea of digital drawing, but working with the kind of surveilling technology and tapping into that have become kind of ubiquitous.
I think the project that probably speaks about that the best would maybe be my residency that I did in 2015 in Italy, in Bologna, in Italy. Yeah. For me, that was an interesting collapsing again of space and time, where I was moving across a border to take up a residency in another country. And then I was having impressions and recording those impressions of that space, and then being aware through this technology of social media of what was happening back home in Cape Town. And there were these kind of strange parallels that were happening in terms of protests and a kind of upheaval or disruption. And so I brought those together in a performance. So it was surveillance in the sense of historical documentation, so things from the past coming into conversation with the ability that we have with our mobile devices to be continuously kind of documenting and sharing or posting live these experiences, say live on Facebook or media. So.
Kath, was one of the links that you sent me, was that one of the projects, was that the residency that you sent me a link to?
Yeah, the Vimeo, link is a video. So.
Should I jump into that and show a minute or so of that somewhere? Is there an apt point that I should show the audience?
Yeah, if you want to get a sense of you might want to just jump ahead a little bit in the video.
Okay, Kath, I will encourage everyone to look at that in full at another time, but one of the things, I know that you sometimes say, stop telling people this, but one of the things you have is she's got an amazing skill of being able to, she taught herself how to draw ambidextrously, so she had a dominant drawing, painting hand, but then taught herself to work in dual, so these kind of live Skype drawings or drawing from moving image are done at the same time by the same hands. And over the years, you've managed to really move so that the two images that are created aren't radically different. There's actually, you've honed that skill quite wonderfully.
Yes, my interest, I think, in borders has gone from sort of image making and how the politics of how borders are imaged through mapping and the colonial archive to a more personal interrogation of, I suppose, borders of perception, so more metaphorical. So I often use the binary of our double vision, the fact that what we're seeing is a construction in our brain, and the fact that we're seeing double all the time, two images. So the idea is simultaneously I'm separating out those images and drawing two images simultaneously. So I think in the video, I couldn't see what you were seeing, but I think it shows some of my webcam paintings that I did and some of the Instagram images I did as well, which is working with these online platforms in order to try and connect with a place or a person via this process of creating a double image. So the viewer is then having to kind of, through the experience of looking, blend those two things across the border of that division between double image.
Kath, thank you.
I think I've got it in here of me.
Fantastic. So, Kath, we've kind of come to the end of our allotted slot, but I would love you to be staying online and you can hear the rest of the presentation. We've got Azadeh just in a moment presenting, and so then the Q&A, so you'll be a part of it, so she's not going anywhere. So thank you so much for the beginning of hopefully a more extended conversation with Kath Bull's work and hopefully her time in Glasgow. I'd love to have her come here in person, just say. Thank you very much. Thanks, Kath.